And nobody wants me to talk about your other senator, who's weak on borders, weak on crime. So I won't talk about him. Nobody wants me to talk about him. Nobody knows who the hell he is.
President Trump wanted Jeff Flake out of office in Arizona.
He is.
Well, now he's got a Democrat there instead. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It's Tuesday, November 13th. Along with Joe, Willie, and me, we have MSNBC contributor Mike Barnicle, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and associate editor of the Washington Post and an MSNBC political analyst, Eugene Robinson, NBC News national political reporter Heidi Prisbilla, and co-founder and CEO of Axios, Jim Vandehei, is with us. So,
you know, Mika, it's really something. You talked about Arizona and this race between Sinema and McSally, and we've seen, unfortunately, so many negative things over the past 2.5, 3 years in American politics. When you actually see great examples of character, Dan Crenshaw on Saturday Night Live, bringing people together. He could have exploited it
for years and made money off of it.
Could have raised millions of dollars of being a victim of liberal pop culture. He chose instead to show grace.
Yeah.
Another really great example of that came last night, and it came actually from Martha McSally.
Yeah.
And it was just a short video that she made, but my gosh, it spoke volumes, and it was a type of character that we just need to see in our leaders, and we saw in her last night.
It gives us so much hope. For the first time in 30 years, Arizona has elected a Democrat to the United States Senate. NBC News has declared Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema the apparent winner over her Republican colleague Martha McSally as the final ballots broke heavily in the Democrats' favor. Ignoring Republican Party leaders' baseless claims of corruption, McSally appeared in a video posted to social media where she thanked her supporters and took note of Sinema's barrier-breaking win.
Hey everybody, I just called Kyrsten Sinema and congratulated her on becoming Arizona's first female senator after a hard-fought battle. I wish her all success as she represents Arizona in the Senate. And I also want to say thank you to everybody who supported me in this campaign, my staff and volunteers and everybody who voted for me. I'm so grateful for you as my wingmen and my wingwomen in this journey. We sure wish it came out with a different result, but I'm so thankful for you. As I traveled around this state, I was so inspired by the many people that I met, and I am convinced Arizona is the best state in the country, and our best days are still yet to come, and I'm going to continue to pray for our success.
You know, in this election year, when so many women won races, it is a woman who lost. Arizona Republican Martha McSally, you saw her right there, who is setting a far better example for our daughters and sons than some of the GOP men who will likely win their races. Yesterday, McSally, a congresswoman and retired Air Force colonel, gracefully conceded in defeat to Democratic Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema for Arizona's U.S. Senate seat. Republicans in Washington urged McSally to continue to churn up conspiracy theories and contest the results, but McSally put aside partisanship and personal ambition to give the people of her state what they need, a clear result that everyone can have confidence in. Contrast that graceful behavior with the shameful rhetoric of Rick Scott in Florida, who is in his own contested Senate race, throwing out baseless allegations of fraud and crime and trying to squelch a full and fair count of the vote. In defeat, McSally showed class and dignity, allowing voters of all stripes a chance to believe again in the character of our leaders and to have faith in our democratic system. Unlike the president and Rick Scott, she puts America first and shows us all true character on one of the toughest nights of her life. What a great example, Joe, for all of us as we get through this strange and difficult time with this presidency.
A strange and difficult time, but a time, Willie, guys, that several Republicans over the past week have shown just may be okay. Dan Crenshaw was written about by David French, and David French said, if this is what the future of the Republican Party looks like after Donald Trump, hey, guess what? we're going to be okay. Last night, McSally facing pressure from Donald Trump, the Republican, the head of the National Republican Party, and also people in her own state saying, hey, you got to fight this out. And you know how those calls were going. Hey, if you want any future in politics, you know, you got to fight and show people that you're tough now.
Right.
I've heard that sort of nonsense before. But actually, McSally showed the character that voters will remember if she decides to step back up and keep serving her country like she has already.
I think the reason both of these felt so good and feel so good to the American people, both Lieutenant Crenshaw's apology, the acceptance of the apology on SNL, and Colonel McSally's concession last night, is because there's so little of that grace in the public life right now. We see so little of that on TV in our culture, and so it's refreshing. It feels good to see someone do that, and something that these two have in common is that Crenshaw is not just Congressman-elect, he's Lieutenant Commander Crenshaw, and McSally's not just Congresswoman McSally, she's Colonel McSally, a trailblazing Air Force pilot. They know what it actually means to put country first, and that's exactly what they both did over the last couple of days.
It is, and it is inspiring. You know, it also, though, Jim VandeHei, if you look at the results, you take a step back and you look at the results from this race, this is another race that has tipped the Democrats' way. And it's been this slow roll since Tuesday night. You know, at 8 o'clock on Tuesday night, Republicans were feeling pretty darn good. The White House was feeling pretty darn good. Every day, it's another race that's falling as these ballots are being counted. And now our own Steve Kornacki says, no, Republicans may pick up 2 in the Senate when they had all the structural advantages going their way. And in the House, Steve's looking at maybe 38, 39 pickups in the House of Representatives in an off-year election that is usually more conservative, more white, and more Republican. What is that? How does that bode for 2020?
Yeah, I think if almost every leading indicator right now that you saw from the election that you see happening in real time is really bad news for Donald Trump. I don't understand the Republicans who are looking at this and saying, and even some Democrats are saying, Donald Trump's in pretty good shape heading into 2020. 3 things are working against him. Those election results were terrible for the Republican Party. When you have these formerly very conservative states like Texas, Arizona, Georgia, all now looking like toss-up states where you have Democrats, if not winning, way outperforming what they've done in the past. You have Midwest states like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania, basically reverting back to form once you take Hillary Clinton off the ticket. Then you add into that, Trump's about to get hit with investigations from 3 different angles where you're going to start to see all the details in public. Robert Mueller, the state of New York, and then tons of investigations coming from Congress. And then 3, we're in the longest recovery that we've been in this nation. Most economists think you're going to hit a recession sometime before the presidency. So I don't know how Republicans look at those results and don't freak out. Not just don't feel good about it, they should be freaking out, because the problem for the Republican Party for some time has been you can't be a mostly white, mostly male party and thrive long-term in this nation. You can eke out some wins now, but if you look at demographics, they don't lie. This nation is having a bigger chunk of Hispanic voters, Asian voters, and a shrinking white population. And the more they harden as the white male party, the more long-term Republicans should be worried.
Right, and Jimmy brought up a great point earlier, and that is that Donald Trump can't afford to lose a single vote. He's losing. Right. I mean, his party lost in Wisconsin, your home state. They lost in Michigan. They lost in Pennsylvania, got routed in Pennsylvania. All of these industrial swing states that were supposed to be Donald Trump's sort of ace in the pocket. But as you point out, he didn't get that many votes in 2020. And as we've been saying forever, he ain't going to have Hillary Clinton to run against in 2020. Because if you go back to those 2020 results, it wasn't that Donald Trump was a great candidate. It was that a lot of Wisconsin Democrats stayed home. In fact, didn't you point out that Mitt Romney got more votes in 2012 than Donald Trump got in 2016 in Wisconsin?
That's true, and people didn't pay enough attention to that. It really was that so many Democrats just weren't jazzed about Hillary Clinton, and no centrist really moved her way in those states. And so what we needed to see from the 2018 elections, where it was 2016 a fluke, where basically these states revert back to form. And every indicator is, yes, they reverted back to form, but not just those states reverting back to form. The long-term threat to the Republican Party is that a rising Hispanic population in Arizona, Georgia, and Texas turn those states from Republican states to purple states to potentially Democratic states over time, just like we saw unfold over the last decade in Virginia. The results show you. You just talked about that Arizona race. You've talked a lot about Cruz's very narrow win. That is Texas. So yes, you should be happy that you won. You should be really, really scared that you won it by 2 points. This is Texas, which means Texas, Georgia, and Arizona are all now doing what all demographers thought would happen. You'd have a rising Hispanic population, shrinking white population, and they would little by little move more Democratic. If that happens, Republicans are in a lot of trouble. It's why that autopsy that, Joe, that you've talked about all the time, the reason that autopsy, when the smartest people in the Republican Party after that Romney defeat looked at the data, they said, we have to do comprehensive immigration reform. We have to win back Hispanics or we're done. And they didn't do that. And in fact, they've done the opposite of it.
They've gone the opposite direction, which, of course, leads us to Arizona. And it leads us to Nevada. Now, you'd have to be a political fool to not understand that calling Hispanics breeders and talking about a caravan of leprosy was going to lose you races in Arizona and Nevada and make Texas tight, which is exactly what happened. Donald Trump did more to help the Democrats in 2 years than the Democrats could have done in a generation. Well, the result is Kyrsten Sinema is going to be the first Democrat elected in an open seat in Arizona since 1976 in the Senate. Let's take a look at what she said yesterday.
Senator John McCain stood for everything we stand for as Arizonans, fighting for what you believe in, standing up for what's right, even if you stand alone. He taught us to always assume the best in others, to seek compromise instead of sowing division, and to always put country ahead of party. Senator McCain said, but we have always had so much more in common with each other than in disagreement. If only we remember that and give each other the benefit of the presumption that we all love our country, we will get through these challenging times.
Mike Barnicle, you know, we free market conservatives always looked at East Germany and West Germany as a perfect laboratory test for what sort of economies work and what sort of economies do not work. Well, we have almost a laboratory experiment in the state of Arizona. That has been ground zero for Donald Trump's immigration fear-mongering. I mean, let's just remember. I mean, as Greg Sargent said yesterday, it was a kind of ground zero for Trumpism. He gave his big immigration speech there in 2016. Remember, during the campaign, he actually, that's where Arpaio got pardoned. And then, of course, Mike, as we all know, he just completely hammered Jeff Flake, completely hammered John McCain, and decided he was going to remake this party in his own image, and Arizona was the place that he was going to do it. He's now done something that no Republican president's been able to do since 1976 in an open seat, elect a Democrat.
And as he basically said, Joe, not only in Arizona, but state after state where he appeared, he is on the ballot. He said, I am on the ballot. You got to vote for me, not the candidate for Senate or House or whatever. I am on the ballot. So he was on the ballot in Arizona. And there's an interesting aspect that's been going on out there. I think we don't pay enough attention to it. We're talking about it today a bit. And it is this. Mark Sanford has a pretty interesting op-ed page piece in the New York Times today. And one of the elements he calls for in the Republican Party to try and reclaim is civility. And you saw civility. We just saw civility with Martha McSally. We saw civility with Mr. Crenshaw on Saturday Night Live. People have a yearning for civility in politics that has been missing for 2 years or more, but certainly for the past 2 years. And I think it was in evidence in everything we've seen and talked about this morning out of Arizona.
Yeah, and Willie Geist, what does Mark Sanford and Jeff Flake have in common? Weren't good enough for Donald Trump. They were not loyal enough for Donald Trump. They didn't bow and scrape enough for Donald Trump, even though they voted with him 95% of the time. And so now Trump drives them out, and he has 2 Democrats in South Carolina and Arizona that he's going to be dealing with for the next 2 years.
Yeah, it was interesting in June when Mark Sanford lost his primary, came on this show, and we asked him about advice for candidates running this fall, and he said, don't cross Donald Trump. He said that was his advice. He wasn't willing to do that, and he lost his seat because of it, he thinks. Gene Robinson, if you look at what happened in Arizona, though, Martha McSally's message last night, the Republican who lost the race and conceded, was all the more important when you consider you had the President of the United States with the loudest and most powerful voice in this country calling that election corrupt in a tweet, saying, should we vote again? We have to protect our democracy. And here comes the person, the woman who's directly affected by this, who will or won't have a job based on the outcome, saying, no, don't listen to all that. Kyrsten Sinema won, fair and square. I'm stepping aside. Let's move forward. Basically blocking out the president's argument.
Yeah, who was the mature adult in that obviously, the president was speaking vile nonsense. There's no indication of any sort of corruption in Arizona, and McSally could not have been classier. A lot of people are thinking she could end up being Senator McSally anyway. The other Senate seat, of course, of Arizona right now is held by John Kyle, appointed to fill the rest of John McCain, the late John McCain's term. Who knows how long Kyle, who was a longtime senator, how long he wants to do that. If he wants to resign, say the governor, Republican governor, looking around at whom he might appoint, I think number one on his list would have to be McSally, especially after that gracious concession speech. She came very close in this election. So Arizona could conceivably, in the fairly near future, end up with 2 women senators. Just to expand just briefly on something Jim Vandehei said, it's not just the fact that there are more Latino voters, but from this election we saw that Latino participation increased, and I think we'll go back into those numbers, but it really looks like a higher percentage of Latinos are voting now, and that should really strike terror in the hearts of Republicans, because Latinos have always sort of underperformed at the ballot box. If they start performing at a rate of, say, African Americans, the Republican Party is toast in a lot of this country.
Yeah, Heidi Przybyla, we're going to go way deeper on Florida coming up, but I still can't really get my arms around Rick Scott's behavior and the behavior of some other Republicans throughout this entire presidency. When you look at results like these in Arizona, isn't that a sign that imitating Trump, copying the caravan message, it's ultimately latching onto a loser?
Well, this is a slow-rolling wave, Mika, but it is a wave indeed.
It is.
And this is the message, I think, that some Republicans are now starting to digest, that this was a round rebuke of Trumpism. And Arizona is a model not only in the way that McSally was so graceful in her defeat, but also in the way that the Republicans, the state-level Republicans, conducted themselves when Trump started fanning suggestions of voter fraud. I believe it was the Republican Secretary of State there who spoke out and said there are no indications here of voter fraud. We're counting the ballots. We have a lot of mail-in ballots under our system. And so that was really a model for other Republicans. We'll see if more imitate that. But to the point also of Arizona, I think this is so important to analyze right now, because this is something that we really missed in 2016 amid the scramble to explain Trump's victory, which is that many states, with Arizona out front, but also including Georgia, Hillary Clinton really came close. She came within 3 points. And so that was the early indication there that these states, the demographics is destiny, was starting to kind of take hold there. And if Democrats actually got their voters out, which is something that didn't happen in 2016 but did this year, those states are forever changing and being moved soundly into the purple to blue column.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.